Here's something that doesn't add up. The number one late-night show in America, the most watched, the most awarded, the one that had just won its first Emmy, was canceled. Not because people stopped watching. Not because the host wanted to leave. The show was pulling in roughly 2.7 million viewers every night, sitting comfortably at the top of the ratings pile for 9 consecutive seasons. And yet CBS pulled the plug anyway. To many observers, the decision seemed to come out of nowhere. Even more puzzling was the timing. Just days before the cancellation became public, Stephen Colbert had made comments on air that some people believe may have made powerful figures uncomfortable. Then, almost immediately afterward, the announcement arrived. The question that followed was unavoidable. What really happened? And why was one of the most beloved voices in late-night television suddenly preparing to leave the Ed Sullivan Theater for the final time? The story became even more surprising when details emerged about how Colbert himself learned the news. He was on vacation when the decision was finalized. Away from the cameras and daily pressures of producing a nightly television show, he had no idea that executives were already discussing the end of his program. His manager reportedly knew for weeks but delayed telling him. While Colbert was enjoying a rare break, the leadership at CBS was deciding that one of the most successful franchises in the history of late-night television would soon disappear. It was a remarkable contrast, the host resting after years of relentless work, while corporate discussions behind closed doors determined the fate of his future. Colbert did not discover the decision until the evening of July 16, 2025. The following morning, rather than allowing the network to control the narrative, he walked into the Ed Sullivan Theater and addressed the audience directly. He announced the news before CBS could do so on its own schedule. That choice alone reflected a trait viewers had come to appreciate throughout his career. He preferred honesty and transparency, even when the circumstances were painful. Speaking calmly and without bitterness, he thanked the approximately 200 staff members who worked behind the scenes every day to make the show possible. He spoke warmly about the theater that had become his professional home and expressed gratitude for the decade he had spent there. Then came the moment that stunned many viewers. Colbert explained that he was not simply stepping aside for another host. There would be no successor. The show itself was ending. The entire institution known as The Late Show would cease to exist. For many people in the audience, that detail was harder to accept than the departure of any individual host. Television programs often survive through transitions. Hosts come and go. Formats evolve. But Colbert revealed that CBS was not planning to continue the franchise at all. The audience responded with loud boos, a spontaneous expression of disbelief and frustration. Looking out at them, Colbert nodded and quietly admitted that he felt the same way. The significance of that announcement extended far beyond one television personality. The Late Show had been a cornerstone of CBS programming since 1993. It began with David Letterman, whose legendary run lasted 22 seasons and fundamentally shaped the modern late-night format. After Letterman retired, Colbert inherited the challenge of following a broadcasting icon. He spent more than a decade transforming the program into something uniquely his own. Now, after 30-plus years on air, the franchise itself was ending. There would be no reboot, no relaunch, and no handoff. A major chapter in television history was simply closing. Much of the controversy surrounding the cancellation centered on something Colbert said just days earlier. 3 days before CBS officially announced the end of the show, Colbert addressed a legal settlement involving Paramount. The parent company is CBS. Paramount had agreed to pay $16 million to settle a lawsuit brought by Donald Trump. The lawsuit concerned claims that CBS News had unfairly edited an interview with Kamala Harris during the 2024 presidential campaign on the program 60 Minutes. Discussing the settlement on air, Colbert described the payment as something that looked a lot like a bribe. It was a blunt statement delivered in front of a national audience. Only 3 days later, the cancellation became official. CBS repeatedly insisted that the timing was coincidental and that the decision had been based entirely on financial considerations. Network representatives emphasized that the choice had nothing to do with Colbert's political commentary, the content of the show, or any ongoing corporate matters. Yet for many observers, the sequence of events was impossible to ignore. The comments aired. 3 days passed. The show was canceled. Even people who understood the business realities of television found themselves questioning whether the explanation was complete. Prominent figures quickly voiced their concerns. Senator Elizabeth Warren publicly stated that viewers deserve transparency and that any possibility of political influence should be examined. The Writers Guild of America went even further, calling for an investigation by the New York State Attorney General. The organization suggested that the cancellation might resemble the kind of favor-currying behavior often associated with powerful institutions seeking regulatory advantages. At the time, Paramount was pursuing a major merger with Skydance Media, a transaction requiring government approval. The timing of everything involved naturally fueled speculation. The merger itself added another layer to the story. Approval from the Federal Communications Commission was necessary before the deal could move forward. The FCC chairman had already issued warnings to late-night television programs regarding equal-time broadcasting concerns. Then, shortly after Colbert's cancellation became public, the merger received approval. Critics viewed that sequence as suspicious. Supporters of the network argued that correlation did not prove causation. Regardless of where people stood, the circumstances created an atmosphere in which questions multiplied far faster than answers. Donald Trump, meanwhile, responded enthusiastically. Posting on Truth Social, he celebrated the news and declared that he was pleased Colbert had been fired. He criticized Colbert's talent and suggested that other late-night hosts might face similar fates. He specifically mentioned Jimmy Kimmel, implying that he expected him to be next. The comments generated additional headlines and ensured that the controversy remained in public discussion for weeks afterward. Colbert's reaction was characteristically direct. Returning to the air, he announced that the gloves were off and delivered one of the most candid monologues of his career. For viewers familiar with his history, that statement carried weight. Colbert had spent years criticizing politicians and public figures through satire and humor. Yet even by his standards, the response felt unusually personal. It reflected a man confronting the end of a major chapter in his professional life, while refusing to abandon the principles that had defined his work. Despite the political controversy, there was also a legitimate financial reality. Late-night television has faced enormous economic challenges in recent years. Traditional audience habits have changed dramatically. Streaming services, social media platforms, and on-demand content have fragmented viewership. Millions of people who once watched television at a specific hour now consume clips, highlights, and interviews whenever they choose. Advertisers have followed those audiences, shifting significant portions of their spending toward digital platforms. According to reports, The Late Show was losing tens of millions of dollars annually. Some estimates place a figure around $40 million per year, while others suggested the actual loss was closer to $30 million. Regardless of the precise number, the financial pressure was substantial. Producing a nightly broadcast from a historic theater in New York City, employing hundreds of staff members, maintaining writers' rooms, booking guests, and supporting extensive production operations created enormous costs. At the same time, many of the show's most successful moments occurred online, rather than on traditional television. Monologue clips frequently generated millions of views on YouTube and social media. However, those views did not necessarily translate into proportional revenue for CBS. The network benefited from exposure, but much of the advertising ecosystem existed outside its direct control. This disconnect became one of the defining challenges facing the entire late-night industry. The situation was not unique to Colbert. A few years earlier, CBS had ended The Late Late Show with James Corden and replaced it with a less expensive alternative. The economics simply favored lower-cost programming. Yet Colbert's program occupied a different position. It was the network's flagship late-night property, carrying significant prestige and cultural influence. Eliminating it represented a far more dramatic move than replacing a secondary time slot. What made the decision particularly controversial was the perception that Colbert had not been given an opportunity to explore alternatives. Cost-cutting measures, staffing adjustments, production changes, and other strategies might have reduced expenses. Critics argued that the speed of the decision suggested financial concerns were only part of the equation. Even some people within the industry reportedly believed that economics alone could not fully explain the outcome. Ironically, The replacement announced for the 11:35 slot appeared to symbolize a broader shift in television priorities. CBS selected a comedy game show associated with Byron Allen's comics Unleashed. Unlike Colbert's program, the format intentionally avoided political humor. To some observers, that distinction seemed highly relevant. Whether intentional or not, the contrast fueled additional debate about the future direction of network television. To understand why Colbert inspired such loyalty, it helps to examine his personal history. Long before he became a household name, he experienced profound tragedy. At the age of 10, he lost his father and two brothers in the crash of Eastern Airlines Flight 212. The accident occurred near Charlotte, North Carolina, in September 1974. Colbert was the youngest of 11 children, and the disaster permanently altered the course of his family's life. Throughout his career, he has spoken about the loss with remarkable honesty, rather than seeking sympathy. He often focused on what he learned from his mother, who demonstrated extraordinary resilience in the aftermath. Colbert frequently credited her with teaching him that devastating pain does not have to produce bitterness. A person can be wounded and still remain open to joy, compassion, and humor. His spiritual journey also shaped his worldview. During early adulthood, he experienced a crisis of faith and considered himself an atheist for a period. Later, an unexpected encounter with a stranger contributed to his return to Catholicism. These experiences influenced the thoughtful and reflective qualities that often appear beneath the comedy. Viewers came to recognize that behind the jokes was someone who had wrestled seriously with grief, belief, and meaning. Colbert's path to television success was anything but straightforward. After attending Hampton-Sydney College, he transferred to Northwestern University and earned a theater degree. He then moved to Chicago, where he joined the famous Second City improvisational troupe. There he formed creative partnerships with Amy Sedaris and Paul Dinello, collaborations that would shape much of his early career. Together, they created the sketch comedy series Exit 57 for Comedy Central. Although the show enjoyed only a modest run, it earned critical praise and multiple award nominations. Colbert later attempted to secure a writing position at The Late Show with David Letterman, but was unsuccessful. Rather than ending his ambitions, the rejection became another step in a long journey. Eventually, he joined The Daily Show in 1997, initially on a trial basis. The opportunity proved transformative, and he became the longest-serving correspondent in the program's history. This background explains why many people viewed his eventual success as well-earned. Colbert did not emerge overnight. He spent decades developing his craft, overcoming setbacks, and steadily building a reputation as one of the sharpest minds in comedy. By the time he arrived at The Late Show, he had already established himself as a significant cultural figure. When he replaced David Letterman in September 2015, expectations were enormous. Letterman had dominated the time slot for more than 2 decades and was widely considered one of the greatest late-night hosts of all time. Colbert faced the difficult task of stepping into an institution while simultaneously redefining it. Early results were mixed. Ratings were inconsistent. Critics expressed uncertainty, and the show struggled to establish a clear identity.